or preserve. Over time, a team that is learning its way towards a sustainable business will see the numbers in its model raise from the horrible baseline established by the MVP coverage to something like the ideal one established in the business plan. A startup that fails to do so will see that ideal recede ever further into the distant. When this is done right, even the most powerful reality distortion failed won't be able to cover up the simple fact if we are not moving the drivers of our business model, we are not making progress. That becomes a sure sign that it's time to pivot. Innovation accounting at IMBU. Here, what innovation accounting looked like for us in the early days of IMBUs, our minimum viable product had many defects, and when we first released it, extremely low sales, we naturally assumed that the lack of sales was related to the low quality of the product. So, week after week, we wonder week after week, we work on improving the quality of the product, trusting that our efforts were worthwhile. At the end of each month, we would have a board meeting at which we would present the result the night before the board meeting. We run our standard analytics measuring conversion rates, customer count, and revenue to show what a good job we had done. For several meetings in a row, this caused a last minute panic because the quality improvement were not yielding any changes in customer behavior. This led to some frustrating board members at which we could show great product progress but not much in the way of business result. After a while, rather than leave it to the last minute, we began to track our metrics more frequently, tightening tightening the feedback loop with product development. This was even more depressing. Week in, week out, our product changes were having no effect. Improving a product on $5 a day, we tracked the funnel metrics behavior that were critical to our engine of growth: customer registration, the download of our application, trial, repeat usage, and purchase. To have enough data to learn, we need just enough customer using our product to get real numbers for each behavior. We allocated a budget of $5 per day, enough to buy clicks on the new Google AdWords system. In those days, the minimum you could bid for a click was 5 cents. That was but there was no overall minimum to our spending, thus we could afford to open an account and get started even though we had very little money. $5 bought us 100 clicks every day. From marketing point of view, this was not very significant, but for learning, it was priceless. Every single day, we were able to measure our product performance with a brand new set of new customers. Also, each time we revised the product, we got a brand new report card on how we were doing the very next day. For example, one day we would debut a new marketing message aimed at first time customer. The next day we might change the way we customer were initiated into the product. Other day we would add a new feature, fix bugs, roll out a new visual design, or try to new layout for our website. Every time we told ourselves we were making the product better, but the subjective confidence was put to the acid test of real numbers. Day in, day out, we were performing random trials. Each day was a new experiment. Each day, customers were independent of those of the day before. Most important, even though our gross numbers were growing, it becomes clear that our funnel metrics were not changing. Here is a graph from one of the IMBU's early board meeting. 3D IM funnel. register but didn't log in. Log in, had one conversation, had five conversation paid. This graph represents approximately 7 months of work. Over that period, we were making constant improvement to the IMBU's product, releasing new feature on a daily basis. We were conducting a lot of in-person customer interview, and our product development team was working extremely hard. co- Cohort analysis. To read the graph, you need to understand something called cohort analysis. This is one of the most important tool of startup analytics. Although it sounds complex, it is based on a simple premise. Instead of looking at cumulative total or gross numbers such as total revenue and total number of customer, one look at the performance of each group of customer that come into contact with the product independently. Each group is called a cohort. The graph shows the conversion rates of IMBUs of new customer who join in each indicated month. Each conversation rate shows the percentage of customer who registered in that month who subsequently went on to take the indicated action. Thus, among all the customer who joined IMBUs in February 2005, about 60% of them log into our product at least one time. Managers with an enterprise sales background will recognize this funnel analysis as the traditional sales funnel that is used to manage prospect on their ways to becoming customer. Lean startup use it in product development too. This technique is useful in many types of business because every company depends for its survival on its sequence of customer behavior called flows. Customer flows govern the interaction of customer with the company product. They allow us to understand a business quantitatively and much more predictive power than do traditional gross metrics. If you look closely, you will see that the graph shows some clear trends. Some products improvement are helping a little. The percentage of new customers who go on to use the product at least 5 times has grown from less than 5% to almost 20%. Yet despite this fourfold increase, the percentage of new customer who pay money for IMBUs is stuck at around 1%. This about that for a moment. After months and months of work, thousands of individual improvement focus groups, design sessions, and usability tests, the percentage of new customers who subsequently pay more money is exactly the same as it was at the onset. Even though many more customers are getting a chance to try the product. Thanks to the power of cohort analysis, we could not blame this failure on the legacy of previous customers who were resistant to change, external market conditions, or any other excuse. Each cohort represented an independent report card and try as we were getting straight C's. This helped us realize we had a problem. I was in charge of the product development team, small though it was in those days, and shared with my co-founder the sense that the problem had to be with my team's effort. I worked harder, tried to focus on higher and higher quality features, and lost a lot of sleep. Our frustration grew when I could think of nothing else to do. I was finally ready to turn to the last resort, talking to the customer, armed with our failures to make progress, tuning our engine of growth. I was ready to ask the right question. Before this failure in the company, earlier days, it was easy to talk to potential customer and come away convinced we were on the right track. In fact, when we would invite customer into the office for in-person interview and usability tasks, it was easy to dismiss negative feedback if they didn't want to use the product. I assume they were not in our target market. Fire that customer, I say to the person responsible for recruiting for our test. Find me someone in our target demographic. If the next customer was more positive, it would take it as confirmation that I was right in my targeting. If not, I fire another customer and try again. By contrast, once I had data in hand, by interacting with customer change. Suddenly, I had urgent questions that needed answering. When aren't customer responding to our product improvement? Why isn't our hard working paying off? For example, we kept making it easier and easier for customer to use IMVUs with their existing friends. Unfortunately, customer didn't want to engage in that behavior. Making it easier to use was totally beside the point. Once we knew what to look for, genuine understanding came much faster, as we describe in chapter 3. This eventually lead to a critical important pivot away from an IM ads on use with existing friends and towards a stand-alone network one can use to make new friends. Suddenly, our worries about productivity vanished once our efforts were aligned with what customer really wanted. Our experiment were much more likely to change their behavior for the better. This pattern would repeat time and again from the days when we were making less than $1,000 in revenue per month, all the way up to the time we were making millions. In fact, this is a sign of successful pivot. The new experiments you run are overall more productive than the experiment you were running before. This is the pattern. Poor quantitative result Poor quantitative results force us to declare failure and create the motivation, context, and space for more qualitative research. These investigations produce new ideas, new hypotheses to be tested, leading to a possible pivot. Each pivot unlocks new opportunities for further experimentation, and the cycle repeat. Each time we repeat this simple rhythm, establish the baseline, tune the engine, make a decision to pivot or preserve. Optimization versus learning. Engineer, designer, marketers are all skills at optimization. For example, direct marketers are experienced at split testing value proposition by sending a different offers to two similar groups of customers so that they can measure difference in the response rate of the two groups. Engineers, of course, are skilled at improving a product performance just as designers are talented at making product easier to use. All these activities in a well-run traditional organization offer incremental benefit for incremental effort. As long as we are executing the plan well, hard work yields result. However, these tools for product improvement do not work the same way for startup. If you are building the wrong thing, optimizing the product or its marketing will not yield significant result. A startup has to measure progress against a high bar, evidence that a sustainable business can be built around its product or services. That's a standard that can be accessed only if a startup has made clear, tangible prediction ahead of time. In the absence of those prediction, products and strategy decisions are far more difficult and time consuming. I often see this in my consulting practices. I've been called in many times to help a startup that feels that its engineering team isn't working hard enough. When I met with those teams, there are always improvement to be made, and I recommended them. But invariably, the real problem is not a lack of development, talent, energy, or effort. Cycle after cycle, the team is working hard, but the business is not seeing results. Managers trained in a traditional model draw the logical conclusion: our team is not working hard, not working effectively, or not working efficiently. Thus, the downward cycles begin. The product development team voluntarily try to build a product according to the specification it is receiving from the creative or business leadership. When good results are not forthcoming, business leader assume that any discrepancy between that was planned and was built is the cause and try to specify the next iteration in greater detail. As the specification get more detailed, the planning process slow down, batch size increase, and feedback is delayed. If a board of director or CFO is involved as a stakeholder, it doesn't take long for personal changes to follow. A few years ago, team that sells products to large media companies invite me to help them as a consultant because they were concerned that their engineers were not working hard enough. However, the fault was not in the engineers, it was in the process the whole company was using to make decision. They had customers but did not know them very well. They were deluged with future requests from customer, the internal sales team, and the business leadership. Every new insight became an emergency that had to be addressed immediately. As a result, long-term projects were hampered by constant interruption. Even more worse, the team had no clear sense of whether any of the changes they were making mattered to the customer. Despite the constant tuning and tweaking, the business results were consistently mediocre. Learning milestone prevent this negative spiral by emphasizing a more likely possibility. The company is executing with discipline a plan that does not make sense. The innovation accounting framework make it clear when the company is stuck and needs to change direction. In the example of early in the company life, the product development team was incredibly productive because the company founders had identified a large unmet need in the target market. The initial product, while flawed, was popular with early adopters, adding the major features that customer asks for seems to work wonders as the early adopters spread the word about the innovation far and wide, but unasked and unanswered were other lurking questions. Did the company have a working engine of growth? Was this early success related to the daily work of the product development team? In most cases, the answer was no. Success was driven by decision the team had made in the past. None of its current initiatives were having any impact, but this was obscured because the company growth metrics were all up and to the right. As well, we see in a movement, this is a common danger. Companies of any size that have a working engine of growth can come to rely on the wrong kind of metrics to guide their action. This is what tempt manager to resort to the usual bag of success treater tricks: last minute ad buys, channel stuffing, and whiz bang demos in a desperate attempt to make the gross numbers look better. Energy invested in success trader is energy that could have been used to help build a sustainable business. I call the traditional numbers used to judge startup vanity metrics and innovation accounting require us to avoid the temptation to use them. Vanity metrics, a word of caution. To see the danger of vanity metrics clearly, let's return once more to the clear early days of IMVUs. Take a look at the following graph, which is from the same era in IMVU's history as that shown early in this chapter. It covers the same time period as the cohort style graph on this page. In fact, it is from the same board presentation. This graph shows the traditional growth matrix. This graph shows the traditional growth matrix for IMVU so far: total registered users and total paying customer. The gross revenue graph looks almost the same. From this viewpoint, things look much more existing. That's why I call these vanity metrics. They give the rosiest possible picture. You will see a traditional hockey stick graph, the ideal in the rapid growth company. As long as you focus on the top line numbers, signing up more customer and increase in overall revenue. You will be forgiving for thinking this product development team is making great progress. The company growth engine is working. Each month is it is able to acquire customer and has a positive return on investment. The excess revenue from those customers is reinvested the next month in acquiring more. That's where the growth is coming from. Cumulative metrics: register, login, activated, active. But this back, but think back to the same data presented in a coherent style. IMVUs is adding new customer but is not improving the yield on the each new group. The engine is turning, but the effort to tune the engine are not bearing much fruit from the traditional graph alone. You cannot tell whether IMVUs is on the pace to build a sustainable business. You certainly can't tell anything about the efficacy of the entrepreneurial team behind it. Innovation accounting will not work if a startup is being misled by these kinds of vanity metrics, gross numbers of a customer, and so on. The alternative is the kind of metrics we use to judge our business and our learning milestone that I call actionable metrics. Actionable metrics versus vanity metrics. To get a better sense of the importance of good metrics, like look at the company called GrokKit. Its founder, Farbud Navy, spent a decade working as a teacher at two large for profit education companies, Princeton's Review and Kaplan, helping students prepare for standardized tests such as the GMAT, LSAT, and SAT. His engaging classroom style won accolades from his student and promotion from his superior. He was honored with Princeton's Review National Teacher of the Year award, but Farb was frustrated with the traditional teaching method used by those companies, teaching 6 to 9 hours per day to thousands of students. He had many opportunities to experiment with new approaches. Over time, Farb concluded that the traditional lecture model of education, with its one to many instructional approach, was inadequate for his students. He set out to develop a superior approach using a combination of teacher lead lectures, individual homework, and group study. In particular, Farb was fascinated by how effective the student to student peer driving learning method was for his student. When a student when a, st- when a student could help each other, they benefit in two ways. First, they could get customized instruction from a peer who was much less intimidating than a teacher. Second, they could reinforce their learning by teaching it to others. Over time, third class became increasingly social and successful. As this unfolded, Ford felt more and more that his physical presence in the classroom was less important. He made an important connection. I have this social learning model in my classroom. There's all this social stuff going on the web. His idea was to bring social peer-to-peer learning to people who could not afford the expensive class from Kaplan or Princeton Review, or an even more expensive private tutor. From this insight, Grokit was born. Farb explains: whether you are studying for the SAT or you are studying for algebra, you study in one of three ways. You spend some time with experts, you spend some time on your own, and you spend some time with your peers. Crockett offers these three same formats of studying. What we do is we apply technology and algorithm to optimize those three forms. Farb is the classic entrepreneur visionary. He recount his original insight this way. Let's forget educational design up until now. Let's forget what possible and just redesign learning with today's student, today's technology in mind. There were plenty of multi-billionaire dollar organization in the education space, and I don't think they were innovating in the way we needed them to, and I didn't think we needed them anymore. To me, it's really all about the student, and I didn't feel like the student were being served as well as they could.